morning we're going to talk a little bit about the past, maybe the recent past. If you were here last year, you don't remember this, but I put a slide up on the screen and it looked something like this. In fact, it looked exactly like this. It says, even without economic thresholds, it's important that peanut fields are scouted regularly for pests. Look at this: lesser cornstalk borer, burrower bug, spider mites. Anybody have a problem with any one of those three last year? Yeah. Hot, dry conditions led to situations that set us up for burrower bug, lesser cornstalk borer, and two-spotted spider mite problem. So what are we going to do today? We're going to look back at 2014 and talk about some of the major pest problems that we had, and then I'm going to make a recommendation. And that recommendation is that you scout your peanuts. It's good to have good people come before you. Dr. Mumford set me up for this. He encouraged you to scout. Dr. Smith talked about the economics, and we're going to talk about why that makes scouting even more important. Dr. Kimmerite, he's just good, and I've got something for him at the end. So we're not going to talk today about specific management recommendations. If you wanted to hear that, come to the county meetings. We'll go in depth into that. Talk to your county agent. If I'm not coming to your county, they know a lot about it. And if not, come talk to me. I'll be around all day if you have a specific question. We had an agent training yesterday. Had about 50 agents from all over Southeast, Southwest. Asked them to estimate what percentage of acreage in their county that were scouted, peanut acreage. Y'all, we could do better than this. If we look at this, 38% of those agents say that in their counties, less than 15% of the acres are scouted for insect pests. Okay, we're leaving money on the table, I guarantee you, by not scouting peanuts. All right, what made my telephone ring in 2014? You already know. I've already mentioned them. This. Something we might forget about thrips because the other stuff was really bad, but in the spring, the phone was ringing because we had some thrips pressure. Then the lesser cornstalk borer showed up, then two-spotted spider mite and a few caterpillars, and at the end of the season when we thought it was all done and we took our peanuts to the buying points, guess what? Burrower bug, and the phone started ringing again. Okay? So it was a busy year. Let's start with thrips. Should we scout for thrips? Well, first of all, I'll say this. If you are going to apply an insecticided plant, whatever it is, and you don't care what thrips do after that, if you have this situation in your field and you say, I'm not going to spray it no matter what, then you don't need to scout for thrips because it doesn't matter, right? But if something like this is going to agitate you and you're going to feel like you need to either keep it from happening or do something about it, well then, let's think about what's going on, okay? 2 years in a row of heavy thrips pressure. Not only was the thrips pressure heavy, it was later than it normally occurs. What does that tell me? It tells me we can't count on the calendar to determine when we need to be looking for thrips, right? Normally thrips flights occur in early May. Last 2 years they've been late May, early June. So we can't rely on the calendar, we got to be in the field. This next bit, this is what I've observed in peanuts over the last 2 years being back in Georgia. Go to the peanut field and I see some adults. Oh, a week or so after that, the immature numbers start to go up because they're laying eggs and those eggs are hatching. A couple weeks after that, guess what? We're at our peak damage rating. So when we go out and take damage ratings, that's when it's as bad as it's going to get, okay? And this is what it might look like. It looks bad, right? If you don't like this, we don't really know for sure what this is going to do for yield, but if you can't tolerate this, and this is going to make you put out a foliar spray, well, if you wait till it looks like this and make a foliar spray, what's going to happen? Well, if you got irrigated peanuts and conditions are good, the peanuts are going to grow out of it in 2 weeks and they're going to look good and you won't be able to tell that the thrips were hardly ever there. What's going to happen if you hadn't sprayed it? If you've got good conditions and irrigated peanuts, the peanuts are going to grow out of it in 2 weeks and you won't tell the thrips were ever there. So if you're going to spray them, guess what? You want to spray them before you hit the peak damage. How are you going to know? You got to scout. You got to know when the adults and the immatures are present. When those eggs start to hatch and the immature thrips are there, that's when you want to make your application. Not when we're at our peak of damage, because at that point you're not doing anything. You're not saving yourself any money. You just revenge spraying at that point because the thrips have done what they're going to do. Okay. Lesser cornstalk borer. This is probably the most important, most damaging pest of peanut that we face. It is, fortunately for us, a sporadic pest. If 2014 was the first year you ever grew peanuts, which it probably wasn't, you may wonder how in the world we grow dryland peanuts, non-irrigated peanuts in Georgia, because this insect was so bad. Hopefully we won't have that again. Could we in 2015? Sure we could. Should we scout for it? Well, let's think about it. First of all, this thing can be there all year. From the time the peanuts come out of the ground to the time we harvest them, we can have lesser cornstalk borer. Guess what? They can rob yield at every step of the way. If they feed on the crown of a plant that just came out of the ground, they're costing you yield. If they're feeding on immature kernels mid-season, they're costing you yield. When they feed on the outside of the pods, when they can't get in anymore, aflatoxin comes in, they're costing you yield. So they're robbing yield all the time. So, well, okay, well, why don't I just put out a granular insecticide in the beginning of the season and preventatively and not worry about it? Well, here's why. We, most of the time, in most of the places in Georgia, do not need to treat for lesser cornstalk borer. Southwest corner of the state, they have a more consistent problem. The rest of us don't need to be putting out granular chlorpyrifos or Lorsban every year for lesser cornstalk borer. One reason is we don't need it. Another reason is that granular chlorpyrifos has the very annoying habit of flaring caterpillar pest and two-spotted spider mite, which is something we don't want to do. Okay, so we don't want to use a product if we don't need it, and most of the time we won't need it. Timing is important, okay? Catch this thing early enough, and it's a whole lot easier to control, because a lot of the population buildup that occurs happens in the field. They're not flying in from somewhere else. They're laying eggs and they're cycling through and continuing to have generation after generation, so a lot of that population buildup happens within the field, so we want to control it within the field. Okay? So the answer to that, should we scout for lesser cornstalk borer? I think the answer is yes. If it's a cool, wet year, guess what? You probably aren't going to have lessers. If your peanuts are being scouted, they can slack off digging up peanuts looking for lessers. But if it's hot and dry, we need to be watching for them. Two-spotted spider mites. Anybody see this one in 2014? I did. A lot. Okay? This is another sporadic pest. 2014 was an outbreak year. I'm going to say it again. When we get to another pest, it was an outbreak year. Should we scout for it? Well, first of all, infestations start near the field borders. Did y'all know that? Almost always, they start near the edge. Well, that gives us an opportunity to control this insect without spraying the whole field if we find it early enough. And guess what? Finding it early is extremely important. If you wait until you have this, black peanuts, you ain't never going to get it. There's no product available, legal or otherwise, that will eliminate that problem once your peanuts look like that. You got to get them early, okay? Treat before the infestations are severe. How about this? Control options are limited. Well, what does that tell me? It tells me that I got nobody riding shotgun from the one product we have for spider mites and peanut, which is Comite. If you don't get it and it doesn't work, you got nothing else, okay? Infestations are made worse by organophosphate insecticides and pyrethroids. If you apply granular chlorpyrifos to control your lesser cornstalk borers, you are going to create issues with two-spotted spider mites. Maybe not every year, but if you have a year with lots of mites, it's going to cause a problem. Pyrethroid insecticides. I'm going to diverge from my scouting message for just a second. We had a lot of folks put pyrethroids on two-spotted spider mite on purpose because they were told that that was what they should do to control two-spotted spider mite. The answer to that is no. Do not use bifenthrin for two-spotted spider mite. Okay? Yes, spider mites are on the label. Yes, you will reduce populations for about a week. Yes, they will come back worse than they were before, and you'll be sorry you did it. Okay? So this is something that happened a lot. I saw it in a lot of fields in 2014. I hope to not see that again in the future. Stay away from pyrethroids where you have two-spotted spider mite. All right, what is this picture? This right here, this yellow spot right here is how peanut field cries out for help. When you ride by the field and you see this, stop and look. Something's going on, okay? What is it? If you have a good consultant, a good scout, they would have caught it before it got to this point. But if you're riding by and you see this, if you let it go, you're going to have a problem, because when you look at it, guess what? Damage is getting kind of bad. These leaves are curling up. This looks like pretty bad damage for no more mites than there are here. You know why? Because the mites have already started to spread. They're already in those pretty green peanuts in that picture. The ones that look okay already got mites. By the time you get to this point, it's probably too late to spot spray. Good scout, a good consultant, find these mites before you get to this little hot spot right here, and you can spot spray those and avoid having to treat the whole field. All right, foliage feeders. I'm going to break this into two groups. We got early tobacco budworm problems, not in every field. If it was every field, it'd be easy, right? We'd just spray every field, but they're not in every field. We got a multi-species complex all season long. So after that, it could be any one of probably 7 or 8 or 10 caterpillars that we might have. Well, should we scout for them? Oh heck, I can just throw a little worm product in my fungicide application, right? I'm going over the field anyway, why not do that? Well, let's look at it. Early tobacco bud worms. How many of you spraying fungicides in the first 20 days peanuts are out of the ground? Probably not very many, and we don't want to make a prophylactic insecticide spray then. If you're not scouting for tobacco budworm early, they can come in and strip those peanuts before you know what's going on. If you see your neighbor spraying and you go, oh, I wonder what they're spraying, and you go out there, it's probably too late, okay? Need to be looking for those caterpillars. What's that? Large plants can compensate for damage. So you can have a lot of caterpillars in an actively growing, healthy peanut field. 8 caterpillars per row foot. That's a lot of caterpillars, right? No problem. Okay? But what do? We go out in the field and we see some caterpillars and we see some leaves with holes in it. And by God, you never shake them out, right? You don't really count and say, well, I'm going to spray them. Too many of our acres are treated when we're below threshold for one of a number of reasons. One is we just don't like the way it looks, or we don't scout it at all. And so, well, I'm making that fungicide application, I'll just put a little product in the tank. Be very cautious if you're going to use pyrethroid in the tank, because what? First of all, it won't kill a number of the caterpillars we got, and 2, it flares spider mites. So we need to be careful about that one. If you're going to use one of the new caterpillar products, they're great. Smoke caterpillars are awesome. They're also expensive. Do you want to make a $15 an acre application and not know that you even have a pest in the field? I don't want to do that, okay? So the answer to the question is yes, I think we need to be scouting for foliage feeding. Burrower bug. We're going to diverge a little bit from the scouting message because we don't have a scouting plan for burrower bug. We don't have a sampling protocol for this. Yes, we can sample them, we can catch them in light traps, we can catch them in pitfall traps, but what does that mean for us when it comes down to damage at harvest? We don't know, so there's a lot of work that needs to be done. This insect, hot and dry conditions, as we said before, the perfect storm for these major peanut pests. Okay. Right now we're looking at doing some things to try to help us on burrower bug. One of them is to develop some sampling methods so that we can go to the field and know if we have a problem. Another thing that we are trying to do is identify some of the factors that increase your risk of damage. We know things like non-irrigated peanuts are at higher risk. We know that if you have conservation tillage or use conservation tillage, you're at higher risk. But are there other things? Are there geographic issues? Are there locations that are at higher risk? One of the things that Dr. Mumford and his group, John Falk, have done in the last few days is put together this map showing Seg2 peanuts in Georgia in 2014. Now this doesn't mean that all these Seg2 peanuts were from burrower bug, because they weren't. But it does give you an indication of where we had Seg2, and some of them were from burrower bug.